They say the Great Lakes hold secrets darker than their deepest waters, that the forests of Michigan whisper stories the state would rather you never heard. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 accounts that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the Wolverine State. These aren't campfire tales passed down through generations. These aren't urban legends embellished over time. What you're about to hear are documented incidents that occurred in Michigan, stories that were buried, dismissed, or simply forgotten. Stories that the people involved wish they could forget. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. The people in these stories were ordinary folks. They had jobs, families, routines. They never expected to encounter the inexplicable. But Michigan has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it, in abandoned townships, in the depths of winter, in places where civilization's grip loosens just enough for something else to slip through. So turn off your lights. Make sure you're alone. Because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at Michigan the same way again. And if you're ready to descend into the darkness with me, hit that like button. Trust me, you'll want to remember where you heard these stories. Let's begin. In the winter of 2018, Marcus Webb took a job as a fire lookout in the forests near Lewiston, Michigan. The position was simple: live in a remote tower for 3 months, watch for smoke, report any fires. The isolation didn't bother him. In fact, he craved it. After a messy divorce and years of city noise, the silence of the northern Michigan wilderness sounded like paradise. The tower stood 60 feet high, surrounded by dense pine forest that stretched for miles in every direction. The nearest town was Lewiston, population 900, 15 miles to the south. His only connection to the outside world was a 2-way radio that crackled with static more often than voices. The first 2 weeks were exactly what Marcus needed. He spent his days scanning the horizon, reading books, and enjoying the kind of quiet that city dwellers can only dream about. At night, he'd watch the stars through the tower windows, their light undiminished by any competing glow. He started sleeping better than he had in years. Then he began to notice the sounds. It started on day 16. Marcus was preparing dinner when he heard something outside, a sound that didn't belong to the wind or the creaking of trees. It was rhythmic, almost like breathing, but too measured to be natural. He grabbed his flashlight and scanned the area below the tower. Nothing. Just snow-covered ground and the skeletal silhouettes of bare trees. He convinced himself it was an animal, a deer maybe, or a bear preparing for hibernation. But the sound came again the next night, and the night after that, always after dark, always from somewhere just beyond the reach of his flashlight. On the 4th night, Marcus decided to record it. He set up his phone near the window and waited. At 11:47 p.m., the sound began. Through the phone's speaker the next morning, it was unmistakable. Something was breathing down there, something large. And worst of all, the breathing seemed to synchronize with his own. When he inhaled, it inhaled. When he exhaled, so did it. Marcus called the ranger station. Jake, the supervisor, laughed it off. "You're hearing things, city boy. Forest plays tricks on your mind. Give it another week. You'll be talking to the trees." But Jake agreed to send someone to check the area. 2 days later, Ranger Chen arrived, trudging through 2 feet of fresh snow. She circled the tower, examined the tree line, and found nothing unusual. "No tracks, no signs of any large animals," she reported. "You've got deer trails and some rabbit tracks, but that's it. Whatever you're hearing, it's not leaving prints." That should have been reassuring. Instead, it made everything worse. Chen stayed for coffee, and as the sun set, Marcus felt genuine fear for the first time since arriving. "You should stay," he suggested. "Wait until dark, you'll hear it." But Chen had a 2-hour drive back and a boyfriend expecting her. She left, and Marcus watched her truck's taillights disappear into the darkening forest. At 11:43 p.m., 4 minutes earlier than the previous night, the breathing started. Marcus grabbed the radio. "Jake, it's here. It's happening right now." Static. He tried again. More static. The radio was working fine that afternoon. He checked the batteries, the connections, everything was functional. But all he could raise was that empty, crackling static. The breathing grew louder. Marcus pointed his flashlight straight down, and his heart stopped. There, in the fresh snow directly below the tower, he could see the snow moving. Not from wind, not from any visible source. The snow was compressing as if something heavy was standing there, perfectly still, directly beneath him. But there was nothing there. No shape, no shadow, just the impression of weight. He watched for 3 hours, unable to move, unable to look away. The breathing continued, patient and measured, and then at 2:47 a.m., it stopped. The impression in the snow remained for another 30 seconds, and then, as if whatever made it had simply ceased to be, the snow slowly expanded back to its original level. Marcus didn't sleep that night, or the next. The breathing returned every night, always a few minutes earlier than before. By the end of the week, it was starting at 9:30 p.m. By the middle of the second week, it began at dusk. He called Jake repeatedly. "Send someone else. I'm coming down." But Jake was dealing with a wildfire outbreak 300 miles west. "Marcus, I can't spare anyone. Look, you've got 3 weeks left. The pay is good, just stick it out." So Marcus did what any reasonable person would do. He started documenting everything. Photos, recordings, detailed logs. He sent them via email whenever he could get a signal on his phone. Most never went through. The forest had poor reception, and the tower's internet connection was spotty at best. On day 38, Marcus woke to find something on the tower's external ladder. Not footprints, there were no feet, but the metal rungs were covered in a thin, oily residue that hadn't been there the night before. It had no smell, no color in the flashlight beam, but when he touched it with a gloved hand, the residue felt warm, almost body temperature, despite the sub-zero weather. He spent that day in near panic, watching the ladder. When night fell, the breathing began earlier than ever, at 5:15 p.m., just as the last sunlight disappeared. But this time, something was different. The breathing was coming from above him. Marcus slowly raised his eyes to the ceiling. The tower's peak was 30 feet high, exposed to the elements with a simple catwalk circling the observation deck. Something was up there. He could hear it moving, slowly, deliberately. The metal groaned under weight that shouldn't exist. And then he heard it, a sound that wasn't breathing at all. It was mimicry. Something up there was repeating the sounds he'd been hearing, but playing them backwards, as if rewinding a tape. Every breath, every creak of the floorboards, every word he'd muttered to himself over the past weeks, all of it spooling backward in a grotesque parody. Marcus grabbed the radio and screamed into it. By some miracle, Jake answered. "Marcus, what the hell? Send someone now! It's in the tower!" The line went dead. Marcus grabbed his knife, his flashlight, his phone. The breathing thing was descending the interior ladder now. He could hear the rungs creaking one at a time. But when he shined his light up the shaft, there was nothing there. Just empty space and the sound of something that defied sight making its way towards him. He made a decision that probably saved his life. He went out the window. The tower had an emergency zip line installed for exactly this kind of evacuation. Marcus clipped on and jumped, sliding down the cable toward the tree line. Behind him, the entire tower shuddered. Not from wind, from something releasing a sound he'd never heard before. Something between a sigh and a death rattle. Marcus landed hard, stumbled, and ran. He ran for 6 hours through the darkness, following his phone's compass. At dawn, he reached a logging road. A truck driver found him 3 hours later, hypothermic and incoherent. When rangers returned to the tower 2 days later, they found it intact. Marcus's belongings were undisturbed. The radio worked perfectly. The ladder showed no residue. But every single recording device, his phone, his laptop, his camera, had been completely erased. Not just the files deleted, the storage itself had been somehow degraded, as if exposed to powerful electromagnetic radiation. And in Marcus's logbook, on the final page he'd written before his escape, someone had added one line, in handwriting that wasn't his. Day 39. The listener became the listened to. Marcus never returned to Lewiston. He moved to Arizona, to the desert, where trees are sparse and the night holds no whispers. He doesn't talk about what happened, but those who knew him say he no longer sleeps in silence. He keeps a radio playing, a TV on, anything to fill the air with sound. Because silence, he learned, isn't empty. In the forests of Michigan, silence is full. And sometimes, what fills it is listening. Before we continue to our second story, I want to ask you something. If you're enjoying this descent into Michigan's darkest corners, hit that subscribe button, because what's coming next? On October 12, 2016, Sarah Chen was driving from Ann Arbor to Traverse City for her sister's wedding. The drive should have taken about 3.5 hours. Sarah left at 6 p.m., giving herself plenty of time to arrive by 10 p.m. and get a good night's sleep before the ceremony. She was an experienced driver, had made the trip dozens of times, and knew M115 like the back of her hand. She should have arrived. She didn't. The official report states that Sarah's car was found 3 days later, parked at a rest stop near Cadillac, 40 miles from her destination. Sarah was found sleeping in the driver's seat, confused but physically unharmed. But unharmed doesn't tell the full story, because Sarah Chen's 3-day absence lasted only 4 hours by her account, and what happened during those 4 hours changed her in ways that medical science still can't explain. This is what she reported to the police and later to the private investigator her family hired when the official investigation went nowhere. The drive started normally. Sarah had her GPS running, her phone charged, a full tank of gas. The sun was setting as she merged onto US 131 North. Traffic was light. The October sky was clear. She called her sister at 6:45 p.m. to confirm her ETA. The call went through without issue. At approximately 7:20 p.m., Sarah noticed she was low on gas. Odd, since she'd filled up before leaving. But the gauge showed less than a quarter tank. She decided to stop at the next station. According to her GPS, there should have been one in 12 miles. She drove 20 miles. No station appeared. Sarah checked her GPS. It showed her location, but the surrounding area was wrong. The roads didn't match. Instead of M115, her position showed her on a road called Michigan Highway 401. She'd never heard of a 401. Michigan highways don't go that high. She tried to reroute. The GPS couldn't find a path to Traverse City. It couldn't find Traverse City at all. Sarah pulled over and grabbed her phone. No signal. Not searching for signal, just nothing. The phone worked fine. She could access her photos, her music, but the entire connectivity interface was gone, as if the phone had never been designed to connect to networks. The sun had set completely now. Sarah's headlights illuminated a 2-lane road cutting through dense forest. No lights ahead, no lights behind, no traffic at all. She'd passed at least 20 cars before pulling over. Now there was nothing. She started driving again, slower this time. Her gas gauge was now on empty, though she'd only driven about 30 miles total. The engine sounded fine, no warning lights except the fuel indicator. Then she saw the sign, Nowhere Junction, 5 miles. Sarah had been driving Michigan roads for 15 years. She'd never heard of Nowhere Junction, but a junction meant civilization, meant people, meant help. She continued. The 5 miles took forever. The road seemed to stretch, each mile marker taking longer to reach than the last. The forest on either side grew thicker, the trees pressing closer to the road. Sarah's headlights began to dim, though she'd replaced them 2 months prior. Finally, she saw lights ahead, not street lights or storefront lights, but something dimmer, more orange, like gas lamps or firelight. As she approached, Nowhere Junction revealed itself. It was a small crossroads. 4 buildings stood at the intersection: a general store, a diner, a post office, and a gas station. All looked old, not vintage or retro, but genuinely old, as if they'd been built in the 1950s and never updated. A single car was parked outside the diner, a Plymouth Fury, powder blue, in pristine condition, the kind of car you'd see in a museum, not on a working road. Sarah pulled into the gas station. Her gauge now read completely empty, but the car was still running. She got out. The air smelled wrong. Not bad, just different, like earth after rain, but sweeter, almost artificial. The gas station was open. She could see through the windows, old-style pumps, a single register, shelves stocked with products and packaging she didn't recognize. She tried the door. Locked. She knocked. No answer. Sarah walked to the diner. Through its windows, she could see inside. Red vinyl booths, a long counter, a jukebox in the corner, and people. At least a dozen people, all sitting perfectly still, like mannequins. They were dressed in clothing from different eras. A woman in the 1950s dress, a man in the 1970s bell-bottoms, another in what looked like 1920s work clothes. Sarah tried the door. It opened. The moment she stepped inside, everyone turned to look at her. Not naturally, not gradually, all at once, all heads swiveling in perfect unison. Their faces were normal enough, human faces with human features, but their eyes were wrong. Not in color or size, but in expression. They looked at Sarah with something between curiosity and hunger. "I need help," Sarah said. Her voice sounded muffled, as if she were speaking through thick glass. "My car's out of gas, and I'm lost." For a long moment, no one responded. Then the woman in the 1950s dress smiled. Her mouth moved normally, but her voice came from everywhere at once, from the walls and floor and ceiling. "You're not lost, you're found." Sarah backed toward the door. Every person in the diner stood up simultaneously. Not threateningly, not quickly, but the synchronized movement was worse than any aggressive gesture. "Where am I?" Sarah demanded. "Nowhere Junction," the woman said, still smiling. "We're all here. We're all waiting." "Waiting for what?" The smile widened. "To be remembered." Sarah ran. She burst through the door and sprinted to her car. The engine started, still no gas, but it started. She threw it in reverse and floored it. In her rearview mirror, she saw the diner's door open. The people filed out, standing in the line on the sidewalk, watching her leave. None of them moved after that.
They just watched. Sarah drove back the way she came, her empty tank somehow still propelling her forward. The road seemed different now, shorter, straighter. The trees weren't as close. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, she saw normal highway signs. M115. She was back. She pulled into the first gas station she saw. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the pump. She checked her phone. 11:37 p.m. She'd left Ann Arbor at 6 p.m. Just over 5 hours had passed. That was impossible. It felt like days. She called her sister. "Sarah, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours. Your phone was going straight to voicemail." "I got lost," Sarah said, because what else could she say? She made it to Traverse City at 1 a.m. The wedding happened. Life continued, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She started noticing things, small things. Her car's odometer showed 300 miles more than it should have. She'd only driven 180 miles total. Where did the other 120 come from? In photos taken after that night, Sarah noticed she cast 2 shadows, even under a single light source. One normal shadow and one that fell at the wrong angle, as if from a light source that wasn't there. And the most disturbing, Sarah developed an inability to get truly lost. No matter where she drove, no matter how unfamiliar the area, she always knew exactly where she was. Not consciously, but her body knew. Her feet would guide her down correct streets. Her hands would turn at the right intersections, all without consulting a map or GPS. It was as if that night at Nowhere Junction had recalibrated something fundamental in her navigation system. She hired the private investigator 6 months later, after the nightmare started. The PI, a former Detroit detective named James Harrison, took her case seriously. He drove the route she'd taken. He searched for any mention of Nowhere Junction in state records, historical archives, or Native American oral histories. He found nothing. No junction, no Highway 401, no record of any such place ever existing in Michigan. But he did find something else. Sarah wasn't the first. Harrison uncovered 7 other reports over the past 60 years. Different people, different times, all describing the same thing. A mysterious junction appearing on Michigan roads, populated by people from different eras, all waiting to be remembered. Every single person who reported the experience showed the same peculiarities afterwards: the impossible odometer readings, the dual shadows, and the uncanny navigation ability. 2 of the previous witnesses were dead. Both had died in car accidents. Both crashed on straight, clear roads with no...
There are towns in Michigan that don't appear on maps anymore. Ghost towns, officially, abandoned when the mines closed or the factories shut down or the highways rerouted. They're curiosities, sometimes tourist attractions, sometimes just clusters of rotting buildings that nature slowly reclaims. Pine Ridge was supposed to be one of these towns. Supposed to be. In 2019, urban explorer and photographer Mitchell Torres set out to document Michigan's forgotten places. He'd already covered dozens of sites: abandoned asylums, defunct auto plants, empty schools. His Instagram had over 200,000 followers who loved his haunting images of American decay. Pine Ridge was next on his list. The town had been abandoned in 1983 after the paper mill closed. Population had been around 400 at its peak. Now, according to official records, the population was 0. The town wasn't even technically a town anymore, just unincorporated county land, owned by the state, slowly being consumed by forest. Mitchell drove up on a Saturday in July, accompanied by his girlfriend, Emma Hollis, and his best friend, Tyler Grant. They arrived at 3 p.m., parked at the old town limits, and hiked in. The road had been reclaimed by vegetation, but was still navigable. The first thing they noticed was how intact everything was. Most abandoned towns show signs of vandalism, scavenging, decay. But Pine Ridge looked,
maintained. The buildings were old, yes, but not collapsing. Windows were mostly intact, doors hung properly on their hinges. The general store still had goods on the shelves, canned food, though the labels were faded and the brands unfamiliar. "This is weird," Emma said, filming with her phone. "It's like everyone just left yesterday." Mitchell was thrilled. This would make an incredible feature. He began photographing everything: the empty storefronts, the silent houses, the school with its playground equipment rusted but still standing. Tyler explored the residential areas, poking his head into unlocked houses, marveling at the furniture left behind, the photos on the walls, the sense of interrupted lives. They spent 3 hours documenting the town. The sun was starting its descent when Mitchell noticed the church. It stood at the end of Main Street, white clapboard with a tall steeple, its bell still hanging in the tower. Unlike everything else, the church looked new. Not old maintained, but genuinely new, as if it had been built recently or renovated with care. "We've got to check that out," Mitchell said. They approached the church. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was pristine. The pews were polished, the floor was clean, hymnals sat in their holders looking fresh off the press, and at the front, on the altar, was a guest book, open to the most recent page. Mitchell walked up to it. The entries went back years, but the handwriting was all the same. Not different people signing in. The same handwriting, over and over, filling hundreds of pages with variations of the same message. "Welcome to Pine Ridge. We're so glad you came. Please stay." Tyler laughed nervously. "Okay, that's creepy. Someone's definitely messing with explorers." But Emma wasn't laughing. She was looking at the dates. The entries were dated chronologically, day after day, year after year, going back to 1983. Over 13,000 entries, all in the same handwriting. "We should go," Emma said. Mitchell agreed. They left the church. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows. The town felt different. Not threatening exactly, but watching. As they walked back toward their car, Mitchell noticed something odd. The streets had people on them. Not many, just a few figures, visible in the distance, standing on porches or in windows, too far away to see clearly, but definitely there. Mitchell raised his camera and zoomed in. Through the lens, he could see them more clearly. They were dressed normally, t-shirts, jeans, casual clothes. They weren't moving, just standing, facing the street, facing them. "Hey!" Tyler shouted. "Anyone there?" The figures didn't respond. They walked faster. The figures remained perfectly still. As they passed houses, more appeared, in windows, on porches, in yards. Always still, always watching. Emma started running. Mitchell and Tyler followed. Behind them, they could hear something. Not footsteps, not voices, just a sound like breathing, but multiplied, as if dozens of people were synchronizing their breaths. They reached their car at 6:47 p.m. Mitchell fumbled with his keys, finally unlocking it. They piled in. Tyler looked back at the town as they peeled out. "They're waving," he said, his voice flat with shock. "They're all waving goodbye." They drove back to Ann Arbor in silence. No one wanted to talk about it. They agreed to review their footage the next day once they'd had time to process. But the next day brought new horrors. Mitchell's camera was full of images from Pine Ridge, hundreds of photos. But in every single shot, in every window, in every darkened doorway, there were faces. Not the distant figures they'd seen while leaving. These were close-ups, people pressed against glass, people emerging from shadows, people reaching toward the camera. And all of them had the same expression. Not menacing, not angry, but desperately, achingly lonely. Emma's phone footage was worse. As she reviewed it, she realized that the ambient sound wasn't ambient at all. Under the rustle of wind and their own voices, there was whispering. Hundreds of overlapping whispers, all saying variations of the same thing. "Don't leave. Please don't leave. We're so alone." Tyler wanted to delete everything and never mention Pine Ridge again. But Mitchell found a journalistic obligation. He uploaded select photos to his Instagram with a long caption about the experience. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of people commented that they'd been to Pine Ridge, some recently, some decades ago. All described the same thing: an abandoned town that didn't feel abandoned, buildings too well maintained, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Several commenters mentioned the church and the guest book. One commenter claimed to have taken the guest book as a souvenir, but when they got home, the book was no longer in their bag, and their photos of Pine Ridge showed only empty streets, even though they distinctly remembered seeing figures. Then the messages started. Private DMs, all from accounts with no profile pictures and names like Resident Number 1 through Resident Number 400. Each message was slightly different but conveyed the same plea. "Come back. We miss visitors. We've been waiting so long. Don't you understand? We can't leave, but you can come back. Please come back." Mitchell blocked them. New accounts appeared. He made his profile private. The messages found him on Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn. Always the same plea, always from accounts that disappeared after sending their single message. Emma had a breakdown. She started seeing them, the residents of Pine Ridge, in her daily life. In crowds, on the subway, always in the periphery of her vision. When she looked directly, they'd vanish. But she could feel them watching. She checked herself into a psychiatric facility for 2 weeks. The medications helped. She could function again. But she never looked at her phone footage. She deleted everything and refused to talk about that day. Tyler tried to go back. 3 months after their initial visit, he drove to Pine Ridge alone, determined to prove it was just an abandoned town. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. He had a rational explanation ready. The town was being maintained by a historical preservation society. The figures were mannequins placed by artists. The messages were an alternate reality game. His car was found a week later, parked at the Pine Ridge town limits. Tyler was inside, alive, but non-responsive. He was taken to a hospital in Cadillac, where doctors found nothing physically wrong with him. No injury, no illness, no toxicology issues. But Tyler didn't speak. He didn't react to stimuli. His eyes were open, but he wasn't present. He stayed in that state for 3 weeks. Then suddenly he woke up. He seemed normal, disoriented about the lost time, but normal. He claimed he didn't remember anything after parking his car. A psychiatrist evaluated him, found him stable, and he was released. But Mitchell noticed something when Tyler visited him. Tyler's shadow was wrong. It moved a fraction of a second after Tyler did, like a poorly synced video. And when Tyler spoke, there was an echo, not in the room but in his voice itself, as if someone else was speaking the same words a millisecond behind him. Mitchell confronted him. "What happened in Pine Ridge?" He smiled. It wasn't his smile. It was too wide, too practiced. "Nothing happened. It's just a town." "What did they do to you?" The smile faded. For a moment, Tyler's expression became blank, identical to those faces in the photographs. Then he blinked, and the moment passed. "They didn't do anything. I just stayed for a while."
3 stories, 3 places in Michigan where reality grows thin. The Listener of Lewiston, the Nowhere Junction, the residents of Pine Ridge. You might be wondering if these stories are true. You might be looking for rational explanations, and maybe there are some. Maybe Marcus Webb had a psychological break from isolation. Maybe Sarah Chan experienced a dissociative fugue state. Maybe Mitchell Torres and his friends stumbled onto an elaborate art project or found themselves victims of collective delusion. Or maybe, just maybe, Michigan holds secrets that we're not meant to understand. places where the normal rules don't apply, where the line between our world and something else becomes permeable. I've told you these stories because they deserve to be told, because the people involved deserve to be believed, and because you need to know. If you're driving through Michigan at night, if you're exploring its forgotten places, if you find yourself somewhere that feels wrong in a way you can't quite articulate, trust that feeling. Turn around, go back, don't stay to investigate. Because Michigan is patient. It's been here long before us. It'll be here long after. And in the spaces between cities, in the gaps between towns, in the forests and the back roads and the places we've forgotten, Michigan is waiting. I have more stories, so many more. Stories from the Upper Peninsula, stories from Detroit's abandoned districts, stories from the islands of Lake Michigan, stories that will make these three seem tame by comparison. So I'll leave you with this. If you want to hear more, if you're brave enough to keep descending into Michigan's darkest corners with me, I'll be back next week with stories that will change how you see this state forever. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical. And if you're driving through Michigan at night and you see a town that's not on your map, or a junction that shouldn't exist, or a tower in the woods that's exactly 60 feet tall, keep driving. Some invitations are better left declined. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of viewer I want in this community. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me what's the scariest place in your state. See you in the darkness.